Okay. I'm doing good, Lee. The first time we've met, though we've been connected on Facebook like 14 years, huh? How long have you been doing 12 and 1? How long have you been doing 12 and 1? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. And you get bigger, you get more production. Cannabis grows in the dark. Yeah. 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 I changed the way the world grows. My first experience was in 1963. I started smoking, and the minute that I started smoking, I loved it. You know, once you get turned on to weed, you immediately become a dealer because then you want to buy an ounce and then split it with your buddies, and you start from there. You know what I mean? And everybody starts in the same way, basically. Of course, I took it to the extreme and most people just take it to their keep it in the family kind of connections kind of thing. But you know, I went global with cannabis. Yeah, exactly. That's how everybody starts. Believe me. And so and then I was in the military in '65, and then in '67 I was stationed overseas until '67, and then I came back to Texas, and in Texas I was stationed at Fort Hood, and I got involved with some people there, and I first time I crossed the border with weed was 1967, across the Laredo border in Okinawa. I was on a Nike missile site. Yeah. No, I was on. I know where Kadena Air Base is. I was stationed. My battalion was stationed in uh 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 out of what was it? Uh, well, I forget, but I was in a missile battery in a missile battalion. We had like I don't know 9 sites, Nike sites on Okinawa. Every site, Nike site was protected by a Hawk missile site, and we had I was on a launching area, and we also had a uh, radar area. The site was split up into 2 parts: launching and radar, with a Hawk missile site protecting it. And the Chinese used to do like kamikaze swarms of Chinese jets would come in, and they'd reach the point where they just turned around and went back. But they tested our defenses all the time that I was there, and we never, of course, nothing ever went to anything, but just more alerts and stuff. Uh, uh, it was crazy because that missile was created to blow up a nuclear weapon with a squadron of airplanes coming across. It would take the whole squadron of planes out. No, no afterthought about what's going to happen with all the radiation that comes down. That wasn't part of the thing. You know what I mean? I remember one time that one of the alarms went off. That's the scary one, and everybody had to grab a gas mask and go out into a ditch and lay in the ditch, and then because of the siren going off, and then we heard a helicopter, and a helicopter came out and popped at the launch area, and two men in spacesuits with their own air conditioning and their own air and everything went into the launching area and changed the fuse. All it was a fuse went off. But I looked at that. I remember that time. I said, there I was in a gas mask, and these guys had spacesuits. If anything would have happened, you're cannon fodder in the army, man. You're just a number. Yeah. When was he there with the 101st Airborne? In the 60s? Where did they go to Vietnam? Yeah, because we the when the 173rd and as the airborne units went to Vietnam, they went through jungle training in Okinawa, and there was a rivalry between the Marines, the First Marine Division, and the airborne, right? And so the airborne kidnapped the Marine and tied him and rang him up their flagpole, which there was a big rivalry. Yeah, the 173rd left for Vietnam. They got chopped up in Vietnam. They weren't ready for Vietnam. Nobody was. You know. That, yeah, yeah. And then I started. I started. I was getting a little hash from home, and I was selling a little hash, and some people were selling me weed. And then we went down to Mexico and scored some weed, and to Vietnam from there. So it was the 60s. I got out just before the Tet Offensive. So in '68. So I got out, and then the Tet Offensive hit, and it was all downhill after that. You know, the what? Mexican weed, the people nowadays, they really don't know the history of weed. As far as the weed, they have no history at all. They're not taught history at all here. So the weed, Mexico was a Lilly and Parker Davis, and at the turn of the 20th century, before World War One, uh, The pharmaceutical industry was basically based on cannabis-based medicines and opium-based medicines. So they were afraid. The patent medicine people were afraid that during World War I that their supply from Southeast Asia and Southwest Asia would be stopped. So they started growing their own cannabis sativa americana, cannabis indica americana. They were growing it in Kentucky. They were growing it in Mexico. They were growing it probably in Georgia as well. People don't know the history of cannabis. They don't realize that up until 1940, you could go to the drugstore and buy a bud or cannabis, loose cannabis, or hashish or tinctures right from a pharmacy if you had a prescription. So people didn't realize that, but up until, I guess it was a Food and Drug Act or something around 1914. Well, the reason that they did the is because what they did is they made Mother Nature illegal, and they've been selling you chemical concocted copies ever since. All of our pharmacopoeia either came from China or from Indian Ayurvedic medicine. That's where all the herbs and medicinal plants came from. That's 6,000-year-old pharmacopoeia. So the English, when they went to India and took it over it, they studied the pharmacopoeia there and then just copied it in England, and it's created an industry that at first was natural, but then when cannabis became illegal in the when the cannabis went out of patent in the 1930s, and the big pharmaceutical companies were going to lose control of it, right? They made it illegal until until science caught up to it. And what they did is they took all the recipes for all the organic medicine recipes, and they basically copied them and so you get chemical concocted copies. Like opium, morphine was created to stop the use to help people stop getting into for as a medicine to use for people to get off of opium. Then they invented heroin for people to get off of morphine. So it's been the pharmaceutical companies that have just basically uh, 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 addicted the world to their pharmaceutical drugs, and they made Mother Nature illegal. And then when they DNA sequenced it, and they realized that, oh, look at all these terpenes and all the different things that it does, and they've been able to separate it, and now they have total control. They have the knowledge, you know what I mean? But the marijuana has always been used. Cannabis has always been used as medicine, and for more than 6,000 years. Uh, it was used for using. There's a kind of indica that knocks you out that at first was used for operations and stuff, but when opium came into the picture, when opium was introduced, then they started using opium for a sedative knockout quality where they could have operations and put somebody to sleep. Okay, okay, okay. So basically, they were trying to break into the market, the English, because it's a huge, it's always been a huge economy, China, a huge economy. So and China had everything. The only thing that they didn't have was opium. So for 200 years, they produced opium and hashish in India commercially and sold it all over Southeast Asia. But the opium they imported to China, and they got the populace, about 25% or more of the populace, addicted to opium. So for 200 years, they were opium was shoved down their throats. So while the British, took the silver, the gold, the porcelain, the silk, in exchange for their opium that they were producing dirt cheap in India. Oh, not only dirty, dirty, dirty. You hear people talking bad about China, and oh, Mao, he killed so many people and this and that. When Mao came to power in China, 25% of the population of China was addicted to opium. And so you can imagine. I mean, we have addiction problems here, but it ain't 25%. You know what I mean? Can you imagine what 25% of your people are strung out? And that's what happened to China. And the first thing that China did when Mao took over power in 47 or 40 in the late after World War II, he banned opium. And actually, whatever Chinese could get out got out. But most, they sort of like liquidated and got rid of the Chinese population that was addicted to opium. It was either, clean up or die. You know what I mean? So, I mean, so there's a lot of animosity between the Chinese people and everybody else because, the British, the British. And so, have you ever been to the British Museum? You could go to the museum and then see all the different cultures that they destroyed to get the riches that they have today. You know what I mean? So the British were real villains in Asia. I mean, look what they did to India. They enslaved India. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, just wherever you go, South Africa, the British and the Dutch totally fucked up South Africa, where it's still a bad place to be if you're white nowadays. You know what I mean? There's so much animosity over that apartheid and all that stuff that went down. So basically it's the chickens coming home to roost. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of animosity in the world, like like we have animosity towards Iran. Well, in the 19th century, beginning of 20th century, they had a socialist leader, Mossadegh, and he nationalized British petroleum. Imagine they're sitting on all that oil, and all the money was only going to Britain. You know what I mean? So he nationalized petroleum, oil, and so now it's free for the Iranians to sell and make money themselves. But the Kermit Roosevelt went over to Iran and paid people, they're like $10 a head to protest on the streets, and they overthrew the election in a democratically elected prime minister. They overthrew him, and they brought the Shah. They put the Shah into power, and so. And then the Shah was in the power. Basically, he was their oil. He was their connection for oil. And I was in Iran. I was in that area when they had the 25th anniversary of Cyrus the Great. And the Shah had invited Henry Kissinger, all the big names. They had tents in the desert with every creature comfort known to man. I mean, and he threw a party for Cyrus the Great, where 10 miles down the road people were starving, right? And that caused the Iranian Revolution, where they overthrew that stupid Shah. Another thing is that when They had a legal opium monopoly in Iran. They had one in Thailand too, and you could register to be an opium user. And once you're registered, they just gave you all the opium that you needed. And the same thing in Thailand. That those laws in Thailand changed in the 50s, but the laws in Iran were still like that in the 60s and 70s. People forget. People don't know history, dude, especially when it comes to drugs, because people don't realize that in England they had a legal heroin program. If you were a heroin addict, you could register with the government, and they would give you your fixes, as you needed them. You had a prescription, and well, methadone took over that program, but it was a legal heroin program. When they they created methadone, which is worse than heroin. Methadone is harder to kick than heroin. See, we're people think about the president, or the country leaders of the country. People who lead this country are the pharmaceutical industries. The Drug Enforcement Agency The Drug Enforcement Agency is an arm of the pharmaceutical industry. They enforce the pharmaceuticals laws. You know, right? And because of that, like nowadays, I don't know if you've been to any of these legal shops, but the quality of weed has gone down the toilet. Terrible. And I always thought I right. You know why that is? Right. You know why that is, right? The how I always thought to myself, like, I knew that one day that they were going to try to control the weed and the strength of weed and everything, right? And I think, well, how are they going to do it? How are they going to do it? If people are growing their own, Mexicans are growing, yeah, everybody's growing. How are they going to do it? Well, they did it by introducing auto flowering and feminized strains. So when you smoke weed, and 10 minutes, 20 minutes later, you need another joint, right? That's because when you breed a drug plant to a hemp plant, you lose 50% of the THC and gain CBD. And when you're using feminized seeds, they never see a male, so it doesn't have any staying power. Yeah, it smells great. It looks great, but it don't get you high for very long. And that's how they can. That's how they are controlling the quality and the strength of weed. And like you never, when I went to a session in New York, and they had bags of weed, and it was all these little teeny weeny little buds, chopped down to cleaned up like like bikini trim. And I looked at it, and I remember some of the weed that I sold. Uh, and I just said, man, I can't even believe that these guys can even sell this stuff. And they have a thing called bag appeal. Bag appeal. I had buds the size of my arm, dude. Are you kidding me? And I mean, it just, it's see, there's a lot of not only misinformation from the Dutch, but people just don't know the history of marijuana. In the 40s and 50s and 60s, every state in India and in Mexico grew their own weed. So you had stuff from Culiacan, you had stuff from Michoacan, you had stuff from Veracruz, you had some from, you had Teheran purple, you had all these different kinds of weeds. Yeah, you had commercial stuff that they sold in kilo bricks, but they also had very good quality weed that they sold. See, people think that they're 30 years old, 40 years old, and they think they know more than me. I may be the most experienced weed guy on the scene because I've been selling it since '63. Uh, 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 I remember when Thai weed first came in. I remember really, really, really good Mexican weed where we would sit around uh, 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 and figure out how are we going to sell it for 250 or 350 a pound because it was extraordinary weed and beautifully trimmed and everything. And sure enough, while Colombian was coming, then Colombian started coming in. And the Colombian weed at first was all sensimilla and really hardly any seeds at all. And that was really great weed. And then the Thai weed started coming in. Back in the day, we got weed from source countries that was grown organically and produced organically. We had hashish from Lebanon. We had hashish from Turkey. We had hashish from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Turkestan. We had such a selection of really, really organically owned herbs and hash. And you can't, no matter what they say, oh, the weed of today is as good as it was in yesteryear. No, it's never has been. It never has been. See, organic. Yeah, and the thing about it is that the so anyway, I first started selling Mexican, and then I started getting some really good Mexican. Then we started getting Colombian. Then we always in the '60s we used to get these Jamaican tops that were grown organic in Jamaica. And we used to, it was Kali, one was called Kali, and the other one was lamb's bread. And I used to sell it in New York. I used to get it in 5-gallon buckets with like it was a paint bucket. It was like painted, a paint can, but in a 5-gallon bucket. And it was great weed. I don't want to go to Jamaica and smoke Dutch tree. I want to go to Jamaica and smoke Kali. Now you gotta realize, the pharmaceutical industries and the industry in itself is selling you what they want you to buy, and nobody knows what weed is anymore. So, what I call dumb weed, they're selling dumb weed. It just gets you so stupid you can't function. You try to hire people in the cannabis industry, if they're doing dabs or that kind of thing, they're basically unreliable and don't do the work. If they work and they come in the morning and they're all bright eyed and bushy tailed, they take off for lunch. They get fucked up on the stupid weed or dabs. They come back. They're useless. And so, uh, 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 first of all, the whole thing of dabs is a marketing technique by the Dutch. They created, they took actually chemicals to process marijuana to purify it. And butane. By the way, I wrote a paper 15 years ago. Butane causes cancer, and everybody just they buried me on the internet. But now, if you put butane causes cancer, guess what? You got PhDs telling you that now. But I knew it back then. I mean, so they've taken natural organic product and polluted it with poisons and are giving, and then they tell you, oh, we purge it all out. We purge it all out. No, you don't purge it out. You have a minute amount of a purified form of butane that addicts you. Exactly. And so that's the Dutch, them trying to come up with products to sell you here. You know what I mean? And so, because there's no need to dab. If you have good hashish, it'll melt. It'll dab. You can dab that if you want. It, yeah. There's no reason for BHO. But see, they wanted to control the market. You see, the Dutch want to make cannabis like their control over tulips. People don't know the Dutch have was the worst thing to have that Dutch scene in Amsterdam in the 80s and 90s with the High Times Cup, which was an intelligence gathering event. That whole scene, they ruined marijuana. If you go to source countries, you find and then you DNA sequence them while you collect it, say in the Congo, it has skunk number one in it. Skunk number one is the genetic marker for the Dutch brand. You know, Watson. Yeah, imagine 3 years ago they came out in Grow magazine, and Robert Connolly Clark, who by the way he used to write the UN World Drug Report, he wrote in it. How the fuck do you write the UN World Drug Report and not be a cop? You know what I mean? And how do you get you know? And we went to California, and we looked up police records in Santa Cruz to find out about if there was ever a David Watson arrested. He wasn't arrested. There was no record of him. He was a drug enforcement agency a guy, and I exposed him at the I guess it was the 19th Cup or something in Amsterdam, and about 20 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And I know what the police look like. Believe me, I've been all over the world with. I mean, I've been extradited from Pakistan, chased out of Nepal twice, handed over in chains from Laos. You know what I mean? I mean, come on, man. I know what the police look like. And so the Dutch was like the worst thing that ever happened to cannabis. That whole Dutch scene, and you know the Dutch enslaved genocidal programs against indigenous people all over the world. There was an islands where they collected nutmeg, and they went there and liquidated everybody on that island and took over the nutmeg industry. You know, and that's what the Dutch were doing. That's what they did with tulips. They want to make cannabis like their control over tulips. If it doesn't, if it you know, and they really want to do it even now. Now they have the corporate entities and all this other stuff. Uh, 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 yeah, I'll give you another example. Some friend of mine, he came up with the formula for the ice water method. It was a medical pharmaceutical patent, right? Very difficult to get. When you produce hashish using the correct method, it's a closed loop system. So you collect all the oils and everything released in the system. You collect it all and accrue it. And when you pour the crude out through a coffee filter, 5 micron, the oil that's released in the system goes back into the hash. Nothing can come close to that pharmaceutical quality. Now they taught you bags. I wrote a paper, bubble bags, the biggest consumer fraud in history, and I have a picture of the separation when you do the water technique, and you see that on top the water is floating on top of the oil, and the oil is floating on top of the resin glands. That oil slick you lose using any bag system. So your hash is never going to be that good. Your hash is never going to be that good. Right. So you got when I'm talking, can't interrupt me because I lose my train of thought. Okay. So now they use these bags. Shit, that Cervantes was going to come out with a 15 bag kit. Man, the Dutch figured out a way of processing it where they had an immediate supply. They had immediate products, but that immediate product was 30% less. High Times told you, oh, don't forget about those little trichomes. Just get the big heads, right? Well, those little trichomes, those are flavor, taste, aroma, potency, everything is right there. So they left the good stuff out. Now they have a guy I call, well, he's dead now. I don't care. I'm glad he's dead. A Frenchie the phony, Frenchie Coloni. He came out and he taught people how to make hash. And what he did is he taught people how to take the resin that they've collected in the bags, right? And then they take oils that they've separated from the products, from other products, and they'll add the oil to the dried resin, right? And add some terpenes in there and roll it up into a ball and sell it as a temple ball. 1 minute. It had that stuff. So they took the stuff out. Now they're having to put it back in to be able to sell it. You know, Mila, who they call her the queen of hashish, she was the one that first came out with the isolator bags. It was a 2-bag set, and but still it had a 25 micron catch bag, and all the oils went through that. When you touched your bucket, the bucket was sticky. There's your dope, dude. So in the bucket and never left the bucket. And so people so anyway, they came out with a 2-bag technique, and then Bubble Man came out with 3 bags. Then he came out with 5 bags. Then he came out with 7 bags. Then it came out with 9 bags. Cervantes was going to come out with 15 bags because they were making so much money selling nylon at wedding dress prices, right? Now, and then they'll tell you, oh, the different bags give you different qualities of hashish. No, they give you different broken up pieces of trichome, contaminated with vegetable matter, with plant matter in varying degrees. So when you to get it out at the end, right, it's green. When you look at your trichome, do you ever see green? No, you see cloudy, clear, and amber. You don't see green. When you see green, you've overprocessed it. So Frenchie Cannoli came out here and sold all this expensive equipment, fresh, frozen, this, that, having people buy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of refrigeration equipment and all this stuff. And I look at them. I said, man, why are you doing that, baby? Right away, when you freeze something, it changes the molecular structure of it. One thing. The second thing, why would you freeze it? The only way to pack a weed for long-term use is to vacuum seal it and then flush it with nitrogen. That's how we used to bring Thai weed across. Sometimes it take us 6 months to a year to get the loads out of Thailand and into the States. And we had to find a way of how to pack it where it didn't lose its potency and didn't turn brown, right? So because people were first sending like coffee tins, and they would seal the coffee in tins, and they'd seal it in tins. But even those came back moldy. But when a friend of mine, when he brought vacuum sealing equipment to Thailand in the 70s, that was a vast improvement because we could ship it out of Thailand, store it in the Philippines until we're ready to move it, and it would stay fresh. And we double seal it, vacuum pack it, double seal it, and flush it with nitrogen. When you opened it up in a year later in the States, it was like fresh as the day it was packed. So when I said that on the internet, one of these kids thought, "Oh, that's a great idea." He went out and started buying those vacuum sealing packs, and a machine that was a 20-inch wide machine, vacuum sealing machine with nitrogen flushing, was about $2,000. This guy was trying to sell them for $25,000 on the internet. That's the kind of scene that there's no real love here, dude. Everybody just wants to get what they want to get. And see, And everybody thinks that they're going to make money out of cannabis. Nobody knows cannabis. I'm one of the few people that can tell you the truth about cannabis. You know, in the '60s and '70s, man, in New York, we had so many different kinds of cannabis that, you know, in New York City you could get 15 different kinds of weed. You could get 10 different kinds of hash, three different kinds of Pakistani, all, I mean, different Lebanese qualities. I mean, all this stuff. Uh, 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 so, I mean, and then the Colombian market came in and sort of overtook the Mexican commercial market. And so the Mexicans started to produce really, really good quality weed, really beautiful stuff. They used to, when they shipped it, they shipped it back uh, uh, in turkey bags, packed in styrofoam. Each bud was like beautifully manicured. The smell outrageous. And really, really good Mexican, or the really, really good Jamaican. There was so much good weed and good hash that there was no need to grow any of it because it's just so available. How can you compete with the market? Yeah, I mean, Colombian was going anywhere from 150 to 350 wholesale, depending on the quality. Right. The same thing with Jamaican. Jamaican was going at that high at the high price of quality Colombian. You know, and then in the '80s, you know, when I got back from Nepal, and I tell people, well, I got my PH, my my BA, I got my degree in Kathmandu, I got my master's in Bombay, and I got my PhD on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's one of my resumes, right? Uh, when I got back to from the east, I had some a paper trail, a paper tail, and I had to get off of paper before I could go back to Asia, which I did. So I started selling a lot of weed, and I was very highly connected. I had a warehouse in Golden, Colorado. I had, you know, 36 cars, 36 drivers. I could get a train load. If you had a warehouse where a train could be dropped, a car train could be dropped, we could drop it there in Jersey, full of Colombian. I mean, there came to a point in America in the '70s where you couldn't give Colombian away because everybody had it. You know, everybody had it, and so, and when I got back, you know, I had this warehouse. I was going east to west, north to south. I had a big operation going on. I was moving tens of thousands of pounds, and and my buddy, uh, uh, Ace, he went to the University of Hayes, Kansas, right? So he knew all the farmers from Hayes where they grow all the corn and stuff. And so every year we'd save all the leftover seed that we had, or you know, from doing bales. There's some seeds on the floor. You know, we're wiping them up, putting them in cans, and we used to take those seeds and give them to the farmers in around Hayes, and the farmers would plant it in between the corn stalk rows, right? And they wouldn't have to water it or feed it because the corn gets watered and fed. That they're on a cycle. So they just put the weed there and grow. Before they harvested the corn, they harvested the weed. The weed was always seeded because there was no separation of the males and females. And so the first batches that came out of there, uh, 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 basically uh, uh, is the backbone of the industry today. It was the backbone of the industry in the '80s and '90s and that whole Dutch scene. The when we got that seeded weed, and back in Colorado, I couldn't sell it because it had seeds in it. So, and they wanted a lot of money for it. So I took it out to California, and I sold it to friends of mine that are part of the Grateful Dead, the Hog Farm, and part of the people that came back from India, in the 60s and 70s, and they couldn't really relate to the world back here. So they bought cheap land up in Northern California and started growing weed, right? That weed came on the market, and they used to call it kind bud. Do you go back that far? Okay. That kind bud came from those seeds that we got out of Hayes, Kansas, and that's where the sour diesel. That's where the gas comes. That's where the stuff that smells like cat piss, stuff that smells like dog shit. All these odors and smells came out of this wild ass weed that we were growing in Kansas in between the corn. So I sold those seeds, those pounds, 28 pounds that I sold for $2,200. I couldn't believe that I got $2,200 for that pound. I wouldn't have paid $2,200 for it. You know what I mean? But I sold it for $2,200 to those people in Northern California, and they paid it. They wanted that seed. From that seed came all the strains that you see today. From those days, like sour diesel, chem dog. I had there's some guy going around calling himself chem dog, and so an article. Somebody wrote some stuff about it. He said, "Yeah, I got that from bag seed from an ounce I bought in Crested View, Colorado. That was my fucking headquarters. That if you got that weed, you got it from me. That came from me, right? And so he created that from that. From that bag seed. He created what he calls chem dunk. So I'm at a show in Indo Expo in Denver, and I'm giving those seeds away for free to everybody who comes to the booth. And he got uptight because he's trying to take credit for that shit. And he came up. He came to my table, and when he looked at me, he didn't say shit. He just kept his mouth shut. You know, because what do you say, dude? Fuck, you weren't even getting high when we were moving that weed, man. You weren't involved in shit in creating that stuff. That stuff is freaks of nature from all the Jamaican, Colombian, Hawaiian, Thai seeds that we put out in Kansas that get bred out on those corn farms, and from those seeds that I sent to California, that's where that kind bud came from. And for a while there, a lot of people in America, uh, uh, they first got high at a Grateful Dead concert, and they got high on that weed that we sent because our kids who were growing up in communes in Northern California, hippie kids, were selling that weed at Grateful Dead concerts. So that's where the kind bud came from. But in those days, kind bud had no market. It sold at the Grateful Dead shows, but it didn't sell on the wholesale huge market, retail market that was America at the time. Uh, 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 because the Mexicans were growing great weed, dude. Some of the best I've ever seen, right? And they were selling theirs for like 1,000 a pound, right? So how could and kind bud wasn't as good as that Mexican weed, right? So they couldn't get it. They couldn't get 1,000 a pound. They were getting like 800. They were getting ounces for $50, like that. They were getting $50 an ounce at those shows and stuff. But from that scene, people learned about marijuana. I learned about marijuana from the Mexican I started smoking, and then the weed that I used to get in the barrios in New York, the Chiba Chiba and the La Rubia, which was blonde Colombian weed, really blonde weed, and the really red weed, and the really black. There was Colombian black weed that was really strong. So it took a while for homegrown to take to, to even be acknowledged. But when Reagan came into the president, see, people say to me, Joe, why aren't we buying that great weed from you anymore? Right? And I say, well, the reason that you don't buy weed from me anymore and you're buying in these shops today is because Ronald Reagan, for the first time, let the police get high. And they let the police get high as a way to infiltrate marijuana syndicates. You got to remember that marijuana syndicates in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were run by people that went to fucking kindergarten together. And the most you could get was a few years in jail for anything. So they changed the laws around, and first you get a guy knock on your door, you get introduced to a guy, he sells you 1,000 pounds of the best shit you've ever seen, man, at the best price you've ever gotten. And then he starts buying from you. And that's how they infiltrated the marijuana groups. And they busted down. They'd get the main guy, like in Tucson or somewhere, in Arizona or Miami or somewhere. They'd get the main guy, and they say, you're never going to see your kids again. We want your whole organization, A through Z. So you get a phone call from a guy who used to bring you loads, and he said, oh, man, Joe, man, I got a great load of fucking of Colombian gold, man, and I got paid in it. I just offloaded some stuff, and I got paid in gold and weed. Can I come over and can you take care of it for me? Yeah, man, come on over. Bam. You know what I mean? That's how they got people. They shut everybody the fuck down. As an example, in Hawaii, they opened up a grow shop in Kona in Kona, and they had sold fertilizers, this whatever you needed, and there were two clean cut guys in there, but longish hair and stuff, and they got involved on the scene. They smoked, they got high, they partied with everybody, and they came on to some of the farmers and they said, listen, you grow it. We'll supply you with nutrients, whatever you need, seeds, whatever you need. You grow it, right? And you bring it to us, you pack it, you bring it to us, we'll send it to your people. Your people will get the load over there. They'll sell it, they'll send you back your money, and then when you get your money, you pay us. Right? And at first, everybody was too paranoid. You know what I mean? To believe anybody like that. But a few people did, and they grew it, packed it, brought it to those guys at that grow shop. They sent it back to the States. The people in the States got the packages, right? They sold it. They sent the money to the connection. He got the money. Then he went back to the grow shop and paid them, right? The second and third times that they did that, everybody jumped on board in Hawaii, right? And man, they busted from Kona to Boston. I mean, it took people's cars, their properties. There was just like a madness, and that's how they operated. That's how they operated. They had guys in Thailand who actually injected heroin and got high, were heroin addicts that were actually police. You know what I mean? It was like the theater of the absurd, right? Uh, I was getting hash in New York from Nepal, and so I went over there to pay money to some people that were doing shipping out of Nepal. And basically, I got introduced to the Pope of the Buddhist Church in Nepal, and so they liked me better than the guy that they had there, and so we pulled a coup. We took over the business, and all of a sudden, all of a sudden he couldn't come to Nepal anymore, kind of thing. He was a guy was called Mad Nat. He was a cocaine addict, completely out of his mind. I think the last thing he did before he died was take a shot of coke. That's how crazy this guy was. But he was also the photographer for Andy Warhol, and he hung out at his place, and he knew everybody, took pictures of everybody, and so he had all these pictures from the '60s. That when he did come back to America, he became famous. They wrote that they did a movie, Party Girl, about a very really rich girl who got totally strung out and was part of Andy Warhol scene, and so he was a famous character on the Lower East Side, and so he got overthrown. He was trying to. He didn't like me, and he was trying to get me out of Nepal, and I helped him send some stuff back to the States, and he wouldn't pay me until I left the country, and then I went over to the Chini Lama's house, and I told him what was going on, and I said, "Do you realize that hash is like 3,000 a pound, and 3,000 a kilo in New York?" And he levitated off his couch, landed on his feet, walked over to me and said, "Son, Joe, you and I 50-50 partners, okay?" I said, "All right, I will." I said, and Nat never could come back to Nepal. And he never could come back to Nepal. I had a lot of power in Nepal. I developed a lot of power in Nepal. Made a lot of money in Nepal. Made more money in Nepal than ever I did in my heydays in the States. And so, I was shipping animals out of Nepal. I was shipping dogs out of Nepal. I was shipping everything I can get my hands on that I thought would make it out of Nepal. And finally, I got chased out of Nepal. Well, I sent two Himalayan bears in exchange for two North American brown bears. I had sent four Himalayan pandas. I sent four Himalayan pandas, red pandas, to the Cincinnati Zoological Department, and in exchange, they got me two chimpanzees from the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, and then they shipped those to Nepal. Those were circus chimps. They were like 18 years old. When chimps get too old, they get hard to handle. So they shipped them. They sold them to us for $5,000. Yeah, the zoo paid. We shipped them to Nepal. When they got to Nepal, uh, 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 they became a big hit because they were trained monkeys, right? And the Lebanese had never seen a chimpanzee like a man, like a little man, right? And the Nepalese are big smokers, and they were smoking cigarettes. And the monkey, the chimps would beg them for cigarettes, and then they would start smoking. When the Nepalese realized that those monkeys smoked, because when they gave them a cigarette, they did their whole circus routine. So it was a big hit in Kathmandu. They named the monkeys, the chimps, Kancha and Kanchi, typical Nepali names. And every day in the Rising Nepal newspaper, they would have a commentary about the antics that the chimps had done at the zoo. It was a big attraction. So what happened is, bigger and better. I was going to send two big Himalayan bears. They have a white stripe across their chests, and so I got the two North American black bears. They showed up there, and I put them into the zoo. They were in the zoo, and so my mistake was that I didn't send whatever hash I had then. I said, no, I'm going to wait till the harvest, and I'll send the fucking dynamite stuff over there. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, Nat had gotten busted sending a sloth bear out of Madras, India, and so I got a somebody came up there and warned me, don't send the bears because Nat got busted with a sloth bear and shipping it out with a sloth bear out of Madras, and he's in jail in India. So don't send your bear. So I called up my buddy in New York, and I said, hey, Nat got busted in Madras. He says, I know all about it. I said, well, I can't send these crates. He said, no, you're going to send those crates. Send those crates, right? So I sent the two crates to New York. One of them got drilled. They got drilled in New York, and we're going to an animal farm in Northern California. And at that animal farm in Northern California, we were watching it, but we weren't the only ones watching it. The police watched it too. So we were watching the police watch us. We were watching the police waiting for them to capture the smugglers and the load, right? And so what Panama did was he sent two pickup trucks. One went one way, the other went the other way. There was only one police car there, so they had no option. They had to follow one. So one of the bears made it, and the other bear didn't make it because after we told the guy not to use his CV radio, he got on the CV radio and said, I got away, I'm free, I'm coming home. And bam, they nabbed him. About 3 weeks later, a hunter in Northern California shot a bear, right? And he'd never seen a bear like that before with a white stripe across his chest, like a triangle white stripe across his chest. So they took the bear to the ranger station. It was a bow hunter, and they took the bear there and said, hey, what kind of bear is this? That's Joe's hash smuggling bear. So, but one made it, one didn't make it. But we sent a funny story. We sent a pony when the first 747s first came out. They had a direct flight from New York to Delhi, to Bombay. You could fly directly to India now on a 747. And the 747 had a big cargo hold. So we figured out the biggest crate that we could put on the cargo hold. And we had the Chini Lama scour the Himalayas to find a dwarf horse small enough to fit in this crate that we could send to New York. Right. So we found this ugly ass horse, big head, old one with gray beard, and it was nasty. He bit everybody. And I built this beautiful crate with a belly, straps, and all these kind of things to hold the bear, to hold the horse and everything. And we trucked the horse from Kathmandu to Bombay, where we were going to ship it on the first 747 flight into India that started coming to India. So we trucked it down to Bombay, and we put the horse up at the Santa Cruz racetrack in Bombay, one of the most famous racetracks in Asia, with with $1 million horses and stuff, crazy race horses, right? And and Arabs, Sikhs, a lot of money there at that racetrack. And so we had the horse there, and the Arabs would come up to me and they say, "You're going to send that to America?" And I said, "Yeah, this is a related to Petruski's horse, the first horse." And we're saying, and so we managed to bullshit our way through that. We sent the horse to New York, right? The horse got stopped and got quarantined in New York for 6 months. He got sick in quarantine. We got a call that we figured out, fuck, we're never going to get the crate now, right? We had 150 keys of Nepali fucking cream in there. And we're never going to get it. We're never going to get it when we've lost it. And we get a phone call from the place where they have him quarantined. They said, "Look, your horse is in quarantine. He's sick. He's going to probably die here in quarantine. What do you want us to do with the crate?" "Oh, we'll be right down there to pick it up." So we went down, picked up the crate. We got the crate in, and the horse died in quarantine. And so we got we were that was the first real big shipment before I did the bears and before I did the panda bears. I was getting ready to send a baby elephant the first time they chased me out of Nepal. I was getting. They offered me $50,000 to get a baby rhino out of Nepal. Very forbidden. You can't be. Yeah, that's a protected species. You know what I mean? But $50,000 is a lot of money in 1970. You know, and so the yeah. But what the I went back to Nepal years later, like in the 80s, and nobody there ever knew my name. I'd lived there on the assumed names. When I went back, I had to finally tell people who I really was. You know what I mean? But I have an affinity for Nepal. It's Buddhist. It's a mellow country. It was very, very nice back then. And I was part of the Hundi Bank. The Hundi Bank is the underground banking system that the Indians maintain all over the world. You can actually, here in America, go to a Hundi Bank and give them your dollars here, and they'll give you your dollars back in Nepal in India at a percentage, a small percentage, but that was their business. Hey, when you give us dollars here, we'll give you rupees in India, and then when they gave you rupees in India, they gave you double what the bank rate was. So I was getting the bank rate was $10 10 rupees to a dollar, and I was getting 20 from the Hundi Bank. So I was selling. I had people selling, buying dollars on the street at 15, 16. So I was making like 25% of the dollars I brought over, and now I was making money on the dollars I was getting buying on the streets of Nepal. I had people changing dollars. I was a money man. I made a lot of money with that. That was a big thing. Uh, I I studied the Vajrakila, which is a I guess it's a very uh, esoteric method of clearing energies. You know, and so basically you take bad energy and turn it into good energy. And I was like fanatic. I was collecting every type of ritual implement. I had hooks that could hook you out of hell and get you reincarnated. The Buddhism, the Tibetan Buddhism introduced Buddhism to the Mongolians because they told the Mongolians, hey, you can kill as many people as you want, but we'll hook you out of hell and get you reincarnated again. You'll be back. And that is what converted Buddhism to the Mongolians. You know what I mean? So I had hooks that could hook you out of the hell. I had magic daggers, all these kind. I had an outfit, a silk robe that was all hand carved human bones. And so anyway, I'm standing in my house. I got my money changing business. I got my rug factories. I've got all these things going on in Nepal, and my buddy Ganesh comes up to me and says, "Look, I've uh, I've got an Australian couple with a young child that's a reincarnation lama, and they brought him here to study at Kopan Monastery under Lama Zopa. So I said, Ganesh, man, why are you bringing any foreigners back here where I am? I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing back here, dude. Why are you bringing some guy here nobody knows? I said, don't do it. I said, the only thing that this guy's going to do is get us in trouble. He said, nah, Joe, you're crazy. You're too paranoid. These are students that are going to be studying Buddhism. Da, da, da. They're renting my house. I need the money. You know. I said, Ganesh, don't do this, then. This is a bad move. So they brought the couple over to meet me, and I met their child, and they told me the same riff that their child was there to study as a reincarnation lama ready to study Buddhism at Kopan Monastery. And I told him straight up front, I said, dude, this is the last place that you want to be in Nepal. I don't want you here. You know, you're just going to interfere in my business, and I prefer for you to go. You know, and so Ganesh said, don't listen to him. This is my house. I own everything here. You know, if I want to rent you a house, I can rent you a house. I said, Ganesh, rent these guys a house, we're gonna have a problem. So anyway, he rented them the house, right? And I had the only phone. I had a phone there at Ganesh's house. The Chini Lama had a phone. There was only 2 phones in all of Boda. Now there's 500,000 people there. When I was there wasn't even 500 people. In more monks there than people, than regular civilians. I started getting calls from Zurich, Geneva, Singapore, all these calls, right? And you know, at 3:00 in the morning, because of the time difference. And so I'd have to go over there and get this guy. And I went over there. I said, dude, man, you're getting calls from all over the world, man. You think I believe anything that you say? I think you're full of shit. I really hope that you fucking get the fuck out of here. Right? And so I was nasty to him. And I said, if you continue, you're not going to be able to stay here. I told him, I don't care what Ganesh says. If you continue to do this, you're going to have to go. So it continued, right? So what I did was I put on my robes. I got all my implements, and I did the Vajrakila there, practice outside, where there was rows of rooms that were Tibetans rented a room, and while they're renting the room, they're weaving a carpet. And that's how they make a living. And so I did the Vajrakila practice where I cleared out all the energies. And I went into a trance and I became Dorji Shanu, right? And the Tibetans all ran away because they understood what I was, they were afraid about the practice that I was doing. So they all ran away. Anyway, I did the practice, right? And after I finished the practice, I went back. While I was doing the practice, the Australians were looking at me do this crazy practice with my robes with all human bones and all my stuff, right? And they went up to Ganesh and they said to Ganesh, they said to Ganesh, his exact words, says, Ganesh, whatever this guy's doing, tell him to stop. We're leaving. So they moved, they left. I was very happy. And Ganesh came up to me and said, oh, you chased away my renter. Now how am I going to rent, make money? Da, 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 da. You're not making money, Ganesh. How can you make money? You got 4 wives and 24 children. You're always broke. Are you kidding? You know, so anyway, I couple of weeks went by, 3 weeks went by, and my helper, Furba, went upstairs to where I lived in a duplex. Ganesh lived upstairs, I lived downstairs. And Furba went up there and he came back down and said, look, the Inspector General of Police is here and they want to talk with you. So then I cleaned everything up. He came downstairs. I had like 12 different kinds of coffee. You want Colombian, you want Jamaican. I've always been a coffee freak. I offered him some 555 cigarettes, some beer. He just wanted some tea. He says, Joe, we know you here a long time. Everybody likes you. Everybody loves you. You have a lot of business. You bring a lot of money here. He says, but did you know those 2 people that were staying here, those Australian people? I said, no. I don't have nothing to do with those people. They came here for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They were disturbing me. You know, I have a rug factory. I have all these things going on. You know, I can't have any disturbance, especially some foreigners that are coming here. You know, I didn't want them here. He said, he says, yeah, you know, he says, we arrested those 2 guys at those 2 guys and their child at the airport. They had hashish. Built into their suitcases, right? So I went up to Ganesh and said, see, Ganesh, I told you were going to fucking bring the police here. You brought the fucking police here. But even to this day, 30 years later, where that was like 50 years ago. If you can find those Australians, they'll tell you that Joe put the voodoo on them, man. you can only remember think of what they must think of me after what happened. I had nothing to do with them getting arrested. They got arrested because they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. That's why I didn't want them around my house. You know. Oh, oh, they in the 1980s in Nepal they had an Inquisition there. The when I first went to Nepal, there was no such thing as a Nepalese heroin addict. But if you go there today, there's like 150,000 or maybe more, and hundreds of thousands of people are HIV positive. And so where there was no scene like that, there was no opium dens. There was nothing like that in Nepal like you saw in India or Pakistan or Afghanistan or Thailand even. There was nothing like that. But ganja and hashish were you could buy in a government registered store. I was there when King Birendra made it illegal in Nepal, where it had always been legal for thousands of years. I mean, there's a day in Nepal where everybody has to smoke to God or eat something to God for Shiva's birthday. And they had an Inquisition there, and the World Heritage Foundation declared Nepal like a temple, and that's all it was. It was all temples. So everything is like under Heritage Foundation. They chased all the old time foreigners out, and I mean, overnight people were put in jail just because they had a driver's license and lived long term in Nepal. They threw all the old smugglers, all the older groups out, and to clean up the valley of that vibe, right? And they brought in investments where they built hotels and fancy restaurants, and you have all these kids that come here for hotel management and restaurant management and restaurant business that are learning here and take it back to Nepal. And but then the earthquake there a few years back really killed the tourist business. But people aren't interested in Buddhism like they were in the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's not fashionable like it was then. You know what I mean? So the scene has sort of mellowed out. They wish they had people there. It'd be nice. My friend is running an organization called Re-Legalize Nepal, and trying to make it legal in Nepal. But the police are doing DEA stuff in Nepal, breaking down people's doors, arresting them, for weed, where it's always been legal there. They don't understand that the police there are just basically arms of the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry doesn't want regulated products from Nepal and Pakistan, but you have Pakistani DEA, you have Thai DEA, Nepali DEA, Indian DEA, and basically they're basically police for the pharmaceutical industries to make sure that that the Mother Nature stays illegal. You think it was just Mother Nature that cannabis? It was all Mother Nature that they made illegal. The natural business industry was so huge that it's the industry today pales in comparison. And Detroit, on the Detroit River, Park Benet, Parker Davis, which is now Pfizer, had a huge. It looked like a beer industry, like with big vats and everything. And they had a place where ships could pull in and unload hundreds of tons of weed and medicinal plants that they made into tinctures. Cannabis tinctures, and they had all different types, were the most popular medicine of all time. and has been used. The well, they and during the war, it became very, very popular during the Civil War because they had a cannabis indica made by Dr. H. James, and I have one of those bottles, original bottles, uh, uh, and it was used as a painkiller, sleep medicine, relaxing medicine during the Civil War, and that's where it really became popular, and that's where a lot of people first started being addicted to morphine and laudanum. You know, you have a drug problem. You have a drug problem that's created by the pharmaceutical industry. You know, so the farmers don't make the money anymore. The pharmaceutical industry does, and so now you have all these, lose weight, lose this, all these medicines that they're selling on TV. That probably half of them are cannabis based. Who knows? Because you don't know what the pharmaceuticals are doing, nor can you believe what they're telling you. So I've had a license for 22 years. So since 2002, so it's 21 years. And that's how I got back into the industry. I got back into the business because I had patients and I grew for patients, and and then I had my seed bank, and basically for the past 2 decades, I've been trying to put the flavor and the taste and the aroma and the pungency and the terpenes back into weed. People are just learning about terpenes and what they can do in the last 5 years, within the last 10 years. It wasn't anything talked about 10 years ago. The only one that was talking about it was me. I'm complaining that the shit isn't any fucking good. I want weed that's the Energizer Bunny. I want weed that makes me happy. I want weed that makes me want to party and have a good time. I want weed to enjoy, to relax with. You don't get that weed anymore. You go into the stores, they'll say that's indica, and I look at them and say, well, how do you know that's indica? Because you wrote indica on the what? Yeah, the only true indicas I have. I have the seed collection. I've been in the seed industry, but after COVID, it sort of knocked me out of the saddle. But I've been collecting seeds from all over the world, and I have seeds from back in the day, and I've got land races. I've had DNA sequence check, make sure that they're pure. Anyway, I joined a company called Seeds is Art. I have now a team, and they're replicating all my seeds, and they're replicating all my strains, and we're tissue culturing all my old stuff. And I'm going to be bringing the most outrageous seed bank online that's ever been. It's when people go to Grow Like Joe, it'll be Grow Like Joe, but then you'll go into Seeds as Art, and I have a team of experts growing and replicating my stuff and creating new stuff. One of my new strains that I brought out is the old Paonia Purple from Colorado that we created in the 70s in Colorado, which is an indica sativa F1 hybrid. You know, uh, and then during the 80s and 90s, the Dutch didn't teach you what you needed to know about growing. So a lot of the stuff that was available were clone only plants. What good is that? I want seeds. So what I did is I took all those old strains like Triple X, San Fernando Valley, Chem Dog, all those strains like that, and I OG'd them to my OG line, which is a pure line, and created seeds from those clone only strains. And today, those clone only strains that are coming from seed are the backbone of this industry. When people look at my history, they say, "Oh, you're the one that did all that." Yeah, I'm the one that did that. You know, And you have these kids that I went to a show in Boston, and normally, but when I do a show in Boston, I'm two-way, three times my, it cost me $6,000 to do a show in Boston. By the second, third day, I've already 3, 4 times my money. That doesn't happen anymore. So when you go to these shows now, you have all these younger folk that know nothing about cannabis. All they know is that they want to be in the industry. So, it's like the blind leading the blind. And plus the information that you were given in the grow books was didn't teach you how to grow efficiently. They taught you how to grow more, how to grow less and spend more. When you go buy nutrients to grow tomatoes, do you buy 12 boxes? No, you buy 1 box of tomato food. So I had this kid come up to my booth, and he said, and I was looking at all the stuff, Cal Mag, Bud Booster, all this shit. And I said to him, "What is all that?" He says, "This is what I'm using to grow weed." I said, "Man, why do you need all that shit to grow weed?" I said, "Look, go out and buy a box of tomato nutrients, right? What you grow tomatoes with, and just use that. Forget all this shit here, but just use that." They came back and said, "Wow, I grew the best weed I've ever grown." I said, "You're right. First time you've grown real weed, you use nutrients that are complete." What the what the Dutch did is they broke up the formulas for growing weed into 12 different parts. So now you need some CalMag, or now you need some silica for bud for a stalk strength, and this you need bud booster, you need this, you need that. So they basically based an industry based on fraud. Photoperiodic control, photoperiodism, one of the most important aspects of growing indoors or in a greenhouse, was left out of the grow books. That's biology 101. They left that out of the grow book. So they've been growing, telling people, you got to grow 18.6, 18.6. And I had one guy chasing me around trying to sell me LED lights. And I said to him, I said, "Well, how can you sell me LED lights when you don't even know how to grow?" He says, "What do you mean I don't know how to grow?" "You don't know how to grow. You're using 2 suns worth of energy to grow a weed that grows under 1 sun." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Figure out your 18.6 and then come back and talk to me." He came back. He said, "Oh, you're almost right. We use 1.2 suns." I says, "Where do you get 0.2 of a sun? You're either growing with 1 sun or you're growing with 2 suns." Right? And what they don't teach you is that, well, especially when you're growing indoors and you're giving it direct light, there's a point of no return. There's a point where the tanks are full for photosynthesis, and what happens is the plant droops. And what the Dutch tell you, "Oh, your plant is locked." Well, it's locked because you still giving it light and CO2, but it shut off the CO2 and shut off the light. When in cannabis, when the lights are when the plant is full for photosynthesis, it goes into photoperiodic protection and shuts off the CO2 intake. But you're doing 12 and 12. You're still giving it CO2. You're still giving it light, even though it's shut off the light. Yeah, the most light that a plant can take in a northern climate like Afghanistan, in the colder weather northern climates, is 6 to 6.5 hours. A sativa on the equator, 7 hours and 45 minutes max. And I'm talking about from sunrise to sunset. That's how they measure it. And that's what a plant gets for photosynthesis. So why are you giving it 18.6 in a controlled environment? Because that's what the Dutch told them to do. So everybody's growing like the Dutch way. The Dutch are so crazy that they actually send sales teams here, and they open up grow shops that only promote their methods. And they teach their salesmen how to sell their method. And nobody knows how to grow. Nobody knows how to grow. They're perpetuating myth and fraud. Yeah. Those are the Pied Pipers of the cannabis industry. And let me just tell you something. When at the end of the cup, I wrote a book, The King of Nepal, the Ice Wars edition, and I wrote about all the fraud coming out of Holland. And Mila paid up my publisher not to publish my second edition. She's a scumbag. She's a scumbag. The you know, so they got everybody using CO2 too much, using too much nutrient. Why do you need a bud booster? Just buy some tomato food. You know, so they hate me. They offered me a non-disclosure agreement if I would just shut my mouth. Dude, I'm American. Okay, I grew up on pot. Okay, I don't want to go to Jamaica and smoke fucking Dutch Street. They want you. They want you to go to the Philippines. They're growing Dutch weed there and selling the weed there and saying, "Oh, it's so much better than that weed." I mean, it's just like they're perpetual bullshit. You go, why would anybody go to Colombia and grow indoors? Why would anybody go to Hawaii and grow indoors in Hawaii? Well, it's not 12-12. Even at the equator, there's a point where the night is longer than the day. It may only be a little bit, but it is. Uh, uh, the thing about Hawaii, you can grow nice crops there, two of them too. And if you do light depth, you can do three or four of them there. But I used to get Hawaiian that I sold in New York for 6,400 a pound in the 70s and the 80s. And 375 an ounce. And nothing that you see in these shops today even comes close. Nothing that you see in the shops today come as close to the Thai weed that you used to bring here, or the Hawaiian, or the really good Colombian, or the really good Mexican. I'll tell you a story. I had in the 80s. I had the connection for the Caro Quintado, that Gulf cartel, and they were growing outrageous stuff. It was so sticky, you wouldn't have to press it. You just stick it together, and you can make a baseball, a big basketball out of it just by sticking it together. It was so sticky. So I used to get that. It was manicured beautifully. I used to get it delivered to me in Oregon at 900, and I would take it to New York and sell it for 2,700 a pound. Between $400 and $700 more a pound than kind bud, the best kind bud would get. If weed was allowed to be grown on that kind of level again, most of these people here couldn't even sell the shit that they grow. You know, uh, uh, I go into a store the other day, and the guy said he had all this stuff, and he said to me, he says to me, none of this stuff gets me high. Now he thinks he's old school. He's like in his late 30s or 40s. And I tell him, I said, you're old school. I said, you know what? You wouldn't even know what marijuana was if it wasn't for us in the 60s and 70s and enlightening you about it. Because when the drug war was going on, they had this reefer madness shit that was shown in every high school on TV. You know what I mean? And, you know, if you smoke a joint, you'll be sticking a needle in your arm and all this shit. And so uh, we had to unbrainwash people, and that's what created the marijuana scene in the States by unbrainwashing. Now everybody's been brainwashed again. I went to one place in New York, and we had a session going on, a hash session, and the guy that was there with his son, and his son was trying to be like he's going to make money, so doing this and doing that. And when I went there and I started to talk, you know, I everything that this guy that came out of his mouth was not ill-informed. When his father saw me, he said, "Up, I'll let you talk to him," and he walked away because he knew that his son didn't know what the fuck he was doing about his business. They're processing uh, 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 cannabis to the point where they're separating. They're using CO2. They're using butane. They're using all these kind of crazy chemicals to extract the medicine from inside the plant, and really basically taking a natural thing and adding chemicals to it was one of the sickest things I've ever seen. There's no need for dabs. And by the way, you know, I'll tell people, how long have you been smoking? How long you been? Oh, I've been dabbing for like 8 years. I said, have you tried to quit yet? When you quit dabs, you go through withdrawals. You know that, right? So I mean, why would you want to make a natural product addicting? You know, and again, that's the pharmaceutical industry. You know, I'll tell you, yeah, there's so many phonies in this industry. It's not even funny. But I had one guy, Lawrence Shearnock. He wrote a book about the Great Book of Hashish. He'd never been to a hash producing country. He wrote a book. He was working as at High Times, and he went into the library and took pictures out that he put in his book and information that he put in, and he came out with this book, The Great Book of Hashish. Well, the pictures that he took out of High Times were the pictures that Victoria, my best friend's wife, and John Chick took of all the shit that they were doing in Nepal and in Asia, and they would send the photos to High Times, and High Times would put them in their centerfold. But they never signed their names to them because everybody was on the run, you know? And so he took credit for that. So they brought him over to me when they introduced my book in German. My book came out in German. Uh, 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 they introduced him and they put me to the test about my weed knowledge. Who knows more about weed than Joe fucking Petrie? Give me a break. I've sold every kind of weed that there is. You people don't even know what kind bud is now. That's a forgotten thing. Or people don't even talk about beasters when they shut down the marijuana scene and you couldn't get imports, and then put the Canadians into business, and they started growing weed indoors on a major scale and selling it in the States. You know, and so uh, 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 yeah, it's hard to even talk to people because they all think they know what the fuck they're talking about, and they haven't been around long enough. I had one guy calls himself Blue Skies Vienna, and that he's bringing back the skunk. I that cat's a phony. He bought those seeds in Spain and now said this is the skunk and and really, yeah, no. The first time I saw skunk was in the 70s, and I bought it in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and it smelled like you'd been sprayed by a skunk, and you couldn't take away the smell. You had to vacuum seal it 3 times, and wash the papers up, wash it with alcohol, and then wash yourself to get that smell off. And so I remember when I first got it, I brought it up from Arkansas, and I was sitting with my friend. I said, "Man, for as much as what we paid for this, we're going to have to get $100 an ounce. How are we going to get $100 an ounce for this?" We went out and we sold it for $100 an ounce, 1,600 pound wholesale. We were blown away. That was like in the mid-70s. A lot of money back then. And so, I mean, even really first class Colombian was going for 600 to 800 a pound. You know, commercial Colombian was going. Good commercial Colombian was going for like 250 to 350 a pound. But the really excellent stuff was double. And man, I used to get some weed from Mexico in the '60s, and if I got today, I would blow people's minds. It was so nice, grown in the Sierra Madres. It was so nice, hand picked, hand cut, never pressed, just all bud, sticky bud. I mean, you know. But the Grateful Dead were really. They used to do. I used to live in off of the Chief Jose exit in on I-70 in outside of Denver, and they used to have they have the Chief Jose campground there, you know, and so the Grateful Dead would take over the campground when the Dead were playing at Red Rocks, right? And my buddies at the hog farm, they did all the security work for the hog farm, and they did jobs for the hog farm. They were part of it, of the Grateful Dead, and so. But they were the hog farm. They created Camp Winter Rainbow, the Civa Foundation, which helps people who have glaucoma all over the world. Really good organization, and so those guys were the ones that introduced a lot of the strains and stuff that came from Asia. The Brotherhood of Eternal Love were probably the first growers that promoted growing at the communes across California and wherever they had communes in those. They had big communes as a way of making money of making money. And so that's where you first started to see homegrown, was at these communes, and most of these communes were supported by the Brotherhood. And uh, there's just so much good weed back in those days. It was incredible that people who were growing good weed, they couldn't take over the market because the market was controlled by the Colombians, by the Mexicans, by the Thais, the the hash producing countries. I used to get a kind of Lebanese hash. It was red, and the it came in con sacks, and the sacks had 3 cherries stamped on the outside of the cotton bag, and you could just bend them over like that. Each little bag was 125 grams, so 8 of those bags were a kilo. That stuff was so sweet. So you never saw that hash. That hash, when it's made in Lebanon, it gets sold in the Middle East. The same like in India. The really great hash never makes it out. It gets smoked there. Oh yeah, it gets smoked there. But the best hash that was ever that was known at the time was from Yarkun, Chinese Turkestan. And the I spoke when I was up in Kashmir buying rugs in the '60s, in the '70s. I was living on a houseboat, and I met these rug dealers, and he was an older guy, and they told me that the last caravan from Yarkun with that quality hash came over in 1947. After 1947, they never saw another. a caravan of that hash again. But if you look in the books, they'll say, oh, the Yarkanese hash was noted as the best quality hash in the world. There's really good hash in Nepal, but you got to catch it at the farm, because if you let it go down to the centers where they mix it, then you get it mixed. It's not really pure Nepalese. My buddy Rod brought the Afghan method of sieving and making hash to Nepal. So now, if you go to Nepal, and he did that in the 70s, now if you go to Nepal, the best hash that you get there is sieved. That was taught by my friend Rod. Normally, yeah, yeah. I mentioned it in my books and stuff. Rod was working for me, so yeah, I did. Yeah, I've got three books out: The King of Nepal, the Ice Wars edition. That's a collector's item, and the 15-ounce pound. Big farmers plant the patent pot. You see, they have a genetic marker on weed. If you go to the Congo, think you're getting some land race. If you DNA sequence it, they've it has skunk number one. The You see the strain hunters, Arjan and Franco. He's dead now, and they go around collecting the seeds, and you see them actually giving the African tribesmen their seeds. They're feminized bullshit. So it's totally fucked up the weed down there. You know what I mean? Arjan and Franco are biggest pieces of shit, and they they had a THC exhibition in L.A. run by Todd McCormick, a real scumbag. The Dutch paid Todd McCormick for me not to be at that fair. I've had that happen a couple of, you know, they've threatened me a couple of times. Well, Rosenthal at that cup where I exposed the Dutch ripoff scene, Ice Wars edition. At the end of the show, I was sitting outside in the front smoking a joint, and he came over to me and he said, "You're living proof that the cannabis scene is nonviolent." And I took on him, motherfucker. You better be careful, because I have you hung up on a fucking meat hook, motherfucker. What are you talking about? They actually considered having me killed over that book, the Ice Wars edition. Yeah, it comes from me directly. If they send me an email and order it off my internet, but they got. Well, let me just tell you something. The my whole Since I've joined Seeds as art, my whole trip is being turned around. Grow Like Joe is going to be connected to Seeds Are Art. They're going to be handling all the things. Book sales are going to go through there. Everything. I'm in a metamorphosis type stage right now, and I'm really stepping up my game. And so, because I have a team of professionals that are reproducing my strains and my originals, landrace strains and everything. I have so much landrace. Yeah, that's in that Caesar's art. They took over the marketing of my seeds, and they're being hand selected. Like, I'll put out my Congo Red. I'll maybe put out two or three or 400 seeds out and find the best examples, and that's what I'll breed. See, I wasn't able to do that. I was a one man operation. Now I have a real team behind me that and they just went on a show in Detroit, and I sold more of my seeds there. They sold more of my seeds there than their own seeds. So they know that they have the an unpolished diamond right in their hand. All they have to do is polish it up. I mean, I've got some. I won. I mean, I, there's so much jealousy on the scene of people who think they know, and all this other shit, and actually don't know, and it's frustrating. And even here I am in Oklahoma. I'm probably the most famous fucking stoner that ever lived here, and and I said to them, I said, because a lot of people were going out of business because everybody jumped into the game here thinking that it was going to be an easy thing to get into the marijuana business, end up losing their asses. So I promoted myself. I said, look, if you want, I'll teach your growers how to do the indoor technique and save 60 to 75% of their production costs while upping your production. And they should have taken that ball and ran with it. But they're so ingrained with the fraud that that's all they know. And I have ingredients, nutrients, 1 part formulas that are the best in the world, and the one, the one, and uh, if I had the one in these stores, nobody would buy anything else. That's how good it is. And it's so inexpensive, and it's the finest quality. So yeah, so all that, and it's difficult. But now I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to let this team of young people, they're half my age, in the 30s, and let them run with it. And I expect to do better than I've ever done. And I'm going to be bringing stuff on board that's hand selected, of best examples, hand selected, of each different strain. Like, I've got one strain it's my Kona. It's my uh, a Kona Gold Durban Poison. Right, good. If you smell it, it's the smell that has that old Hawaiian flavor. You know what I mean? And the tropical flavor and tropical taste, incredible. Plus the Durban Poison kicker. I had my Durban Poison DNA sequence. It's one of the rarest strains in the world. That way, nobody can bullshit to me that you go to look at in the Phylos gallery for Durban Poison, and they've got eight different things that they call Durban Poison, none of which are Durban Poison. They're using Durban Poison as a selling point, as a name. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have the biggest collection of African genetics. The yeah, exactly. People don't know what good weed is anymore. You know, I want weed that makes me creative. I want weed that gives me energy, man. I want weed that makes me want to have sex. I mean, I want energizing weed, dude. Yeah, yeah. And I've got so many African genetics, and I'm just, now that I have Caesar Art working with me, all the stuff I've collected over time is going to get opened up and produced. So I'm going to come out with my new seed bank from Caesar's Art is going to blow people's minds away. They'll be able to buy they'll be able to buy the real thing, and my hybrids that I make. What? Yeah, I have Michoacan. I've got a bunch of old school Mexican stuff, but the what was it? The African stuff. I mean, I have one flavor now. I call it chocolate fudge sundae. And when I bought it, when I got those seeds in South Africa from Lesotho, uh, there was a garden, maybe 80 plants in the garden, but there was one plant that would out out pungent anything else, pungency. It was just, you could smell it. There was such great weed there, but there was one that were extraordinary. And that's the one, that seed that I brought back. So now that I have seeds of art, I can blow out 200 seeds, 300 seeds, and pick out the best genetic, the best variety, the best example. And so my whole game is going to get stepped up in 2024. And so I have a kid working with me now. We're partners. He's Chaz. He's from Hawaii too. He's late 30s. He's the CFO for Highland High Farms. He has 4 farms and 4 dispensaries in Denver and Colorado, and the same thing in Michigan. And so he has 90 people on his team. He has 90 people working under him. And so now, I have seeds as art. There's no telling what we're going to be able to come up with. The newest strain that we've come up with is the original Paonia Purple. And that's an Indica Sativa F1. And it became famous in Colorado in the 70s and 80s. Paonia Purple, and then it disappeared because the people who were growing it aren't growing there anymore. Everybody moved on. But that strain I'm bringing that back on. That's going to be my #1 strain that's coming out. It's beautiful artwork on the box. It's just a beautiful thing, hand selected from the best examples. I mean, that's what we're doing, and that's what I'm going to be doing for the future. But I won't be doing it because I'll just be relaxing and I'm living I have a nine acre farm in Oklahoma, and I haven't started growing yet. I have a couple of plants I've grown outside. I have one that's going to be finished in a couple of weeks. My purple chitrali, and but I have grown indoors here. I produce seed indoors, but now I have a team. I've got I've got the capabilities, and they have the abilities. So I mean, I just can't tell you how this is going to be cutting edge quality. There's going to be cutting edge seeds. Seeds are art. They're going to be hand selected from the best examples. And I've got a couple of hybrids. I've got one sour cherry. I won 2 awards with that in Michigan. I'm going to be bringing that out. I've got my black Colombian I'm going to be bringing out. I've got original Colombian seeds from the 70s, so I'm bringing those seeds out. I've got original Afghani from the 70s. I've got original Panama Red from the 70s. I've got a bunch of old stuff, and then I've got a bunch of landrace stuff I haven't even started working with yet because I'm only one person. I couldn't do it all, you know. But now I can. So I expect a much superior quality. I stepped up my game. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that. We're doing a show in Hawaii uh, 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 next year. I have a lot of old school Hawaiian stuff from the 70s. I've got original Kona Gold and stuff. Uh, uh, no, I've seen it, but that the guy who created that duck food was an Australian guy. Yeah, that's an Australian strain. The Australians, they try to create weed that doesn't look like weed. Right. That was really needed. Yeah. but yeah, exactly. And yeah, Victoria used to be guerrilla grower, and she used to grow up in grow in Oregon. Oregon has some great growing areas. There's even like a banana belt in Oregon. Colorado is a great place to grow because it has the same latitude and longitude as Afghanistan. Are you in Grand Junction? Oh, okay. And he grew great weed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's because of the latitude and longitude is in the right place to grow, Colorado. And if you're on the western slope, you were on the western slope. Yeah, that's the best area to grow on is on the western side. What is it? Paonia, Delta, all those areas right there. Those are really great areas. Yeah, exactly. That's a nice. I lived in Colorado for I don't know lots of years, but I lived in Oregon for 16 years. I lived in Colorado in the 70s and 80s, and yeah, yeah, yeah. The indoors is the way, but people don't know how to go indoors. They're wasting too much money on electricity. The we used to do a lot of Thai weed used to run through Washington State and Oregon. Tons and tons and tons. The last big Thai shipment was the Oregon Beaver got busted. They caught it with 72 tons of Thai weed coming into coming into Oregon. I mean, the Thai scene was a huge scene, dude. It was but it was only amongst a handful of people. That's why they shut it down so quickly. You know? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And they called it bubble hash. They, that Mila ruined hash with those bags. They ruined that. Yeah. Oh, the we in the when was it? I guess maybe in the 80s. One of the Brotherhood people went to Jamaica and taught them how to make oil and taught them how to make cash. It must have been the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. But I smoked some Jamaican hash. It was fucking unbelievable. And the oil that he was making in Jamaica was great, 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 great oil. The I had one guy to show you what the scene is like. I had one guy called Wild West Genetics, right? They bought my Durban OG and renamed it Thin Mints. And look how popular mints is on the scene today. That's my strength. You know what I mean? I'm known for that. What? Yeah, that's the cookie strain. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, they want to put there. Oh, this is good. I'll name it after me. And so the only thing that the Wild West admitted to was that they used my Durban Poison OG to create that strain. To change. All they did was change the name. That's all they did. So yeah, the Dutch scene was the worst thing that ever happened to cannabis, other than Anslinger. Anslinger was in the pay of the pharmaceutical industry, and so they it's always been they're trying to control the what? Yeah, DuPont. Yeah, DuPont. He was DuPont's man. Yeah, yeah. Have you seen the material that the Chinese make out of bamboo? Fabulous. It's fabulous. See, you know, the really we can't compete with China on that kind of level. They first of all they've been doing business and exporting, importing, and but thousands of years, and they've been making fabrics for thousands of years. That it used to be a state secret how to make silk, how to produce silk. In Nepal, the Nepalese king married a Chinese princess, right? And when she was came over from China, she smuggled silkworms to Nepal, and that's how Nepal started producing silk in Nepal, and that's how India started to produce silk in India. They got the worms and the thing from China. It was like a industrial spying and stealing kind of shit. But, people have been doing that to the Chinese since forever. I mean, they invented spaghetti. You know what I mean? But what we did to whenever people talk about China being this, being that, I always like to bring out the fact that the British addicted that society for 200 years with cheap opium, and they got the top products out of China, made their country richer, right? And in the end, when Mao came in, he had 25% of the population of China. Figure in those days, China had 400,000 people. I mean, they had 75, 80, 100,000 addicts. Can you imagine? You know, but yeah, we, you know, I guess I forget how many years ago, but within the last 10 years back, maybe a little bit longer, the people were blowing themselves up with these bumblebee extractors. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. It was made in Canada. I don't know how many people blew themselves up with that shit. They'd be using and they'd be doing the extraction while they were smoking a cigarette. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And so the Oregon State Police came out with a bill to try to make extracts illegal. So I did a PowerPoint presentation in front of the state Senate. 25 senators handed out and gave this presentation and showed them what the natural business industry was prior to prohibition, and the amounts and the money and the this and the that. And when the Oregon legislator saw that, I basically killed the state police's case. The last thing I told the state police in front of Senator Morset, I said, Senator Morset, what's the difference between a heroin addict and the state police? And they looked at me funny. I said, well, the heroin addict, he's addicted to heroin. The state police, they're addicted to drug war dollars. What's the difference, Senator Morset? With that, the state police stormed out of there, and the bill was never passed. If Oregon would have passed that bill it would have made the industry, it would have set the industry back decades. Who knows how much? Because then they would have had an example of another state that made it illegal so that you can't make extracts. Very important for the industry. That case that I won in Oregon against the state police, it enabled everybody to do their thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, the that whole Dutch scene has written. I'm glad one thing about you, Lee, is that you realize the damage that was done by the Dutch. Unbelievable, unbelievable. You know, I could have taken that. I have one picture that shows the separation of ice, the separation from the ice water technique, where the water's floating on top of the oils, and the oils are floating on top of the resin glands. And I show that. I say, you see that oil slick? You lose that every time you use bags. That photo I could have sold and a non-disclosure act for probably 100,000, maybe more. Just never show it again. You know, but I don't eat Dutch chocolate. I don't. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I used to tell people, drink the water, you'll get higher, and that was the truth. When you see, I have one of the original machines that Reinhardt made, the closed loop system that collects all the oils and all the terpenes and and all the resin glands. It comes out absolutely pure. Uh, uh, Still, when I bring that machine out, put it up against anything else that you could make, and it'll outperform it. It'll be much better. They're now making sieve hash, but they're also got a new technique that they electrostatic sieving. And so after they sieve it, they run it through the electrostatic sieve, and it removes whatever plant matter is left. So you actually get a really pure product, but it's not as good as what I can make with my machine. But it's very, very good. You can melt it; it melts, and the whole thing. But it's not as strong and not as good because I'm using fresh material. You know. But yeah, anything else you want to talk about? Right. The 15-ounce pound, because nowadays a pound is 15 ounces. So that's like a critique of the industry. Uh, when I was a kid, if your pound was at 454, you paid less. Because a pound is 454 grams. Now a pound is 448 grams. But the 15-ounce pound is basically shows the fraud in the industry, and and the people that were involved in the industry to try to control it, like GW Pharmaceuticals. GW Pharmaceuticals sells a gram of their Sativex, their cannabis spray, for $300 a gram. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense to the pharmaceutical companies because they want to control it. They want to control it. You know, but oh yeah, oh yeah. And the Skunk Man and David Watson and Robert Connolly Clark, they joined GW Pharmaceuticals and were on the board. I think they owned a percentage of GW Pharmaceuticals. You know, and they were the ones that helped. What? It's bullshit. It's bullshit. There, marijuana botany. There's only botany, dude. Marijuana does not have Yeah, can that's the scam. That's the scam. And let me tell you something. A lot of people bought those books and read it, and they think that they know what they're fucking talking about. Yeah, and you know, it's sad. It's sad. Uh, uh, you know. Well, those guys are in the pay of the pharmaceutical companies. Not only that, they're so connected that they write the UN World Drug Report. That's crazy. Send me an address and I'll send you some books. Okay? All right, man. It was nice talking to you, Lee. I really like you, Lee, because you understand the problems. You understand the bullshit. A lot of people, don't understand it totally. When you said marijuana botany, then I said, this is the right guy to talk to because he understands the bullshit. In 1920, uh, 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 Professor Alliard and another guy discovered that some plants are long day, short night flowering, like cannabis, and some plants are long day, short night, like opium. Your springtime flowers, right? And then you have some plants that flower whenever they feel like flowering. And that was the most important discovery in 1920 because it separate they figured out what the lighting schedules were and how to control it by growing it outside indoors and controlling the environment and be able to produce plants year round. So that was the really good weed in Brazil is Thai weed because during the that period there was some Thai that came ashore from some a bale or something of Thai weed came ashore and they got that weed and they got those seeds and those seeds were incorporated into that grow scene in South America. When I went to Uruguay, I put out seeds in Uruguay that improved the genetics in South America like 10,000 fold. So I put Angola red back in Angola, and so I did that. I put those genetics back onto the seed. So there's some good weed being grown in South America, but there is a kind of weed that's grown in, I forget the name of it. I'll think of it in a minute. That's grown in Brazil. That's famous for it. But that's the original Thai weed and Thai seeds that came from Thailand, where they got their hands on those seeds. You know, good move. I've actually smoked Thai weed that was grown in Mexico. A lot of people back in those days, a lot of people who were smuggling from Thailand would smuggle it to Mexico and then have it trucked across the border. You know, the, 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 They had they're shipping it by air, by sea, by by road, by everywhere, man. Yeah. Oh, that's all bullshit. Northern Lights came from that from the Washington area, that area there. They yeah, Seattle. It was grown by a guy called Indian Jim, who was the first guy to produce Northern Lights from Afghani seeds. The original skunk weed, that was Afghani weed. You know. Yeah, Northern Lights. I was a good strain, but now it's been bastardized. Who the fuck is that guy, Greg? You know. Yeah. How old is he? How old is he? Yeah. Yeah. And the I oh yeah, exactly. A lot of people they talk about skunk, they weren't old enough to even have experienced that skunk weed. So if somebody telling me that's 30 years old, 35 years old, that they have the skunk or they smoke the skunk, they're too young to have even experienced it. It's just like Thai weed, you know? Yeah, yeah. I smell some I pulled in to get some gas, and the guy who came over to fill up my tank, he smelled skunk, and I said, "Man, that's it that you're smoking. Can I get some of that?" And he got paranoid that I was a cop. You know, so all I wanted was, "Where'd you get that pot, man?" You know what I mean? All right, so let's talk again. Just send me an address, and I'll send you some books. And by the next time we talk, I'll have my websites and everything uh, fixed up, and I'll have all the information for you too. Thank you, man. Have a great day. You too. Good night.